Welcome to the deep dive, where we really try to unpack a stack of sources, get into the details, and help you get informed fast.
Yeah, cutting through the noise to get to the heart of the matter.
Exactly. And today, we're diving into a lifestyle that, well, it's everywhere online, isn't it? Often seen through this, perfectly curated social media
Oh
lens.
yeah, the classic shot.
Picture this. You're working, laptop out, on some gorgeous beach. You hear the waves, maybe a gentle laptop hum. The sun's setting over the ocean. You know the one.
That's the dream, the image everyone thinks of when they hear digital nomad.
But that image, that romantic idea, it's alluring, sure, but it often glosses over the practical stuff, right? The hidden costs, the bigger impacts this whole thing has.
Absolutely. There's just so much more going on behind those filtered photos. It's often a lot more complex, maybe a bit grittier than the postcard version.
And that's exactly what we want to explore today. This deep dive is about getting past that sun-drenched image. What does it really mean to mix work and travel day in, day out?
Yeah, uncovering the realities, the unexpected hurdles, and what it means not just for the nomad, but for the communities they sort of land in.
It's about figuring out what it actually takes to make a living while you're constantly moving.
And for this deep dive, we've pulled together a really interesting mix of sources. We've got a personal account from a writer who went mobile, worked from an RV for months. Loads of real-world tips and hacks in there.
Okay, like the nitty-gritty.
Exactly. Then there's this really in-depth master's thesis that just meticulously picks apart the tax implications, which, spoiler alert, are complicated.
I can only imagine.
We also looked at academic research focusing on the social and economic effects, specifically in places like Canggu, Bali, which is a massive nomad hub.
Right, seeing the impact on the ground.
Yeah. And finally, some practical analyses breaking down the true costs, the ones you don't always see up front, and the ethical questions involved. So yeah, let's start unpacking this whole global shift.
The pull towards this nomad life, it's strong, isn't it? This idea of ditching the 9-to-5 grind. So when we say digital nomad, what exactly are we talking about? What's the core idea here?
Well, at its heart, a digital nomad is someone who uses technology, laptops, phones, the internet to work remotely. And because they work remotely, they can live this kind of independent, nomadic lifestyle.
So free from the usual constraints of time and place.
Pretty much. They can choose where they live, where they work, based on what they want, rather than where the office is. It's all thanks to, smart devices and decent internet connections becoming so widespread, they can connect and work from almost anywhere.
It's kind of amazing how quickly this has grown from a niche thing into a real movement. What do you think are the main forces pushing people away from traditional jobs and, well, traditional locations?
The few key things converging, really. First, and maybe most obviously, it's the technological advancements. Like we said, high-speed internet is way more available now. Mobile tech is powerful and portable. It just physically removed a lot of the barriers that used to chain people to a desk.
Right, the tech made it possible.
Exactly. Suddenly, doing your professional job from a cafe in Lisbon or an RV in the desert wasn't just a fantasy. It was, actually feasible.
So technology unlocked the how, but what about the why? Why are so many people actually choosing this, even if the tech allows it?
That really gets into shifting values. There's been a big rethink about work-life balance, especially, maybe with younger generations. People want more self-determination, more autonomy over how and when they work.
Less willingness to just accept the standard office culture.
Yeah, I think so. They're less likely to take a traditional job if it means giving up personal freedom or travel or the chance to design a life that really feels right for them. They want to steer their own ship, career-wise.
And I bet money plays a part too. The idea of earning dollars but spending pesos or baht or whatever, that must be a big draw.
Oh, absolutely. Globalization and financial motivations are huge. The world's more connected economically, right? So you can work with clients anywhere. Physical distance just isn't the barrier it was.
So you can tap into global markets for work.
Exactly. And many nomads are building multiple income streams online. That gives a sense of financial security that maybe a single job doesn't offer.
Yeah.
Plus, yeah, leveraging those cost of living differences, that's definitely part of the calculation for many. It gives them more control.
And it feels like there's a whole infrastructure springing up around them too, right? It's not just individuals figuring it out alone.
Precisely. You've got the growth of supportive online communities, Facebook groups, forums, then physical co-working spaces popping up everywhere. And digital platforms, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, they're full of nomad content, resources, inspiration.
Making it seem more achievable, maybe.
Yeah, and less lonely. And we absolutely have to mention the COVID-19 pandemic. That was a massive, unexpected catalyst. It forced remote work onto millions, practically overnight.
Right. Suddenly everyone's home was their office.
And once travel started opening up again, a lot of those workers thought, hey, if I can work from home, why not work from somewhere else? Somewhere nicer, warmer, cheaper.
And some countries jumped on that.
They really did. Seeing a chance to boost tourism and bring in money, some rolled out special visas, digital nomad visas, temporary residence permits specifically designed to attract these remote workers.
Okay, so that paints the picture of the dream, the drivers, the enablers. But like you said earlier, the reality on the ground, it can be different. We have this personal account from a writer who actually did it, traveling in an RV. What was her big takeaway?
Her foundational truth, her mantra almost, was pretty stark. Everything that can go wrong will. It just hammers home that this isn't about tacking some work onto a vacation. It's about the very real, sometimes very difficult challenge of earning your living while constantly dealing with the logistics of being on the move.
Wow, okay. So not quite the effortless freedom portrayed online.
Not always, no. It highlights just how crucial preparation and adaptability are. It's a job, just with more variable scenery and, frankly, more potential pitfalls. It shifts the whole conversation from just romance to, well, practical necessity.
That definitely grounds it. So if someone is serious about this, not just dreaming, but actually planning to make a living on the road, what are the absolute essentials, the foundational things they have to sort out before they even think about leaving? Because it sounds like just winging it is a bad idea.
Oh, winging it is a terrible idea.
Yeah.
The absolute #1 non-negotiable lifeline is internet access. You just can't do the job, file stories, research, join client calls if you can't get online reliably.
Right. Makes sense. Obvious maybe, but critical.
Critical. And the writer we looked at really stresses what she calls a three-pronged approach to making sure you have internet. Relying on just one method, that's just asking for trouble.
A three-pronged approach. Okay, that sounds more involved than just hoping the coffee shop Wi-Fi works. Tell me more.
Okay, prong 1 is your phone hotspot. If you've got even okay phone reception, like 2 bars maybe, you can usually turn your phone into a Wi-Fi hotspot. It's super handy, often a lifesaver for quick tasks or if other options fail.
So step 1, make sure your phone plan has decent hotspot data. But that's not enough on its own.
Nope, because phone signal isn't everywhere and it's not always strong. That brings us to prong 2, location-based Wi-Fi. This means checking before you book accommodation campgrounds, Airbnbs, whatever, if they actually offer reliable Wi-Fi.
The reliable qualifier is key, isn't it? Lots of places say they have Wi-Fi.
Exactly. They might have it, but it's so slow it's useless or it keeps dropping out. You can't rely on the claim alone. You might also find usable Wi-Fi at places like libraries. Sometimes they even leave it on so you can access from the parking lot. The main point here is you need more than one option. Never, ever count on just one source of internet. It will fail you, probably at the worst possible time.
Okay, phone hotspot, location Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
What's prong 3? From when you're really out there or just want more control?
Right. For those times you're more remote, maybe boondocking or just to boost reliability. The third prong is some kind of RV-based Wi-Fi system or a dedicated mobile hotspot device.
Like a MiFi puck or something.
Yeah. Or in the writer's case, they actually got the built-in Wi-Fi system in their RV working. And crucially, they set up their Wi-Fi Ranger device with a different cell carrier than their phones use, like AT&T for the Ranger, maybe Verizon for the phones.
Ah, clever. Hedging your bets on network coverage.
Exactly. It doubles your chances of getting some kind of signal. The Ranger device also acted as a booster, strengthening whatever signal it picked up, whether cell signal or weak campground Wi-Fi, and creating their own private, more stable hotspot. That booster often made the difference between being offline and getting work done.
So the overarching advice is?
Think about where you'll be, anticipate the connectivity challenges, choose multiple solutions, and this is absolutely critical. Test everything thoroughly before you leave home. Test your hotspot, test the booster, figure out how it all works together. They mentioned Elk, California, beautiful place apparently, but 0 phone bars. You do not want to discover your internet. Plan B doesn't work when you're already there.
That sounds like a solid plan for staying connected. But like you said, even with all that, there will be times with no internet. It's unavoidable, right?
How do you prep for total offline periods?
It is totally unavoidable. You will hit dead zones. Maybe you're boondocking, camping way out, or just in a town with inexplicably bad signal. This ties into those bigger infrastructure issues too. The key is plan for it, accept it's going to happen, and be ready to switch to offline work tools.
So you don't just sit there stressing about the lack of signal.
No, the advice is clear. It's way less stressful to just accept you're offline and get work done using offline tools. If inspiration strikes in the middle of nowhere, write it down. You can upload it later. Honestly, the writer says, trust me, it's far preferable to tearing your hair out for hours trying to get online with half a phone bar.
Makes sense. What kind of tools did they use for offline work?
They relied heavily on two main things, Mars Edit and Google Docs offline. Mars Edit is a desktop app great for writing and formatting blog posts completely offline. Then, when you do get connectivity, you can publish with just a click. Okay, handy for bloggers. What about Google Docs? I thought that needed internet.
It does, mostly. But there's an offline mode. The setup can be a bit fiddly. The writer mentioned it took a whole day to sort out account issues to get it working properly. So again, test it at home first. The trick is, you need to be online initially, open the specific document you want offline, click the little Google Docs offline extension icon in your Chrome browser, and then this is crucial, don't close that browser window. Leave it open. As long as it's open, you can keep working on that doc offline.
Curiously, you just leave the window open.
Yep. Seems weird, but it works. They wrote entire 7,000-word book chapters that way, completely offline in the RV, as a lifesaver. And of course, there's always the low-tech option. Pen and paper. Never fails. The point is having a plan B, C, and maybe D for getting work done, connected or not.
Brilliant. Okay, fail-safes for internet, fail-safes for working offline. What about the gear itself? Laptops, phones, they must take a beating on the road.
Absolutely. Yeah. Think about it like having a spare tire for your car. You need tech redundancy. Look at the essential tech you need for your work. For those items, bring backups, especially backup battery packs and cords. Cords, apparently, are the top offender for sudden, random, unexplained death.
Huh. I wouldn't have guessed cords.
Yep. Ideally, if you can swing it, a backup device, a second laptop, a tablet that can do the basics. And definitely make sure you have the essential programs or apps on your smartphone too, just in case your main computer dies miles from anywhere. Having those backups stops a minor tech issue from becoming a work-stopping crisis. It saves you from pulling your hair out.
Preparation, 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 it seems to be the theme. What about planning the work itself? Your projects, your route? How strategic do you need to be there?
Very strategic. You need a strategic itinerary and careful project choice. Having at least a rough itinerary helps you plan your work schedule. Knowing roughly where you'll be and when lets you prioritize Wi-Fi when you book places. The writer said checking Wi-Fi reliability quickly became their absolute #1 priority when choosing where to stay.
So function over form sometimes? Picking the place with good Wi-Fi over the slightly prettier place with none.
Pretty much,
Yeah.
if work needs doing. And then there's careful project selection. The writer found it way less stressful to focus on long-term projects with flexible deadlines. Like if you're writing a book and the draft isn't due for 6 months, nobody minds if you say, hey, I'll be off-grid for a few days next week.
Right, you build in buffer time.
Exactly. Trying to juggle rush assignments or projects with really tight, inflexible deadlines while nomadic, that's where things can go wrong fast. They shared a story about an article assignment turning into a nightmare because the source had a chaotic schedule and they kept losing phone signal trying to coordinate. So yeah, be very cautious about accepting time-sensitive work.
That makes a ton of sense. Okay, you've prepped your tech, your projects. How do you handle clients? Do you just tell them you're working from a beach in Thailand?
Maybe not quite like that.
Yeah.
But client communication is absolute key, and honesty is the way to go. You need to proactively reassure them that you're still working. This isn't a vacation, you're just doing it from different locations.
Confidence is important then.
Hugely important. If you sound confident that you can deliver consistently, most clients are fine with it. Especially now, post-pandemic, everyone's used to Zoom calls and remote work. They mostly care about the work getting done well and on time, not your physical location.
So just be professional about it.
Exactly. And it's smart to underpromise on deadlines a little. Build in that extra cushion for travel delays, connectivity issues, whatever. That 5,000-word chapter that took a week at home, maybe budget 2 weeks for it on the road. It's all about managing expectations, theirs and your own.
Okay, so you've done all the prep, you're packed, you hit the road. But we know things change, plans go awry. The road demands flexibility, right? What's it actually like living and working this way day to day? How do you juggle work, life, money when your environment is constantly shifting?
Yeah, flexibility becomes your middle name. The first thing is realizing your workspace isn't always going to be that picture-perfect view. You get resourceful about finding dynamic workspaces.
Beyond the RV or the hotel room?
Oh, yeah. Libraries are gold mines, quiet, free Wi-Fi usually, coffee shops obviously, and co-working spaces can be fantastic. The writer even used one, CoLab in Santa Rosa, to give a live presentation. The key is just being adaptable and checking ahead, making sure places are actually open and operational, especially with things still being a bit unpredictable sometimes.
Right, check-in opening hours, Wi-Fi status, more prep. And what about productivity? Does your carefully crafted home routine just, evaporate?
Pretty much, yeah. You have to be realistic and flexible with productivity. Remember that under-promising thing. It's crucial because travel itself eats time. A drive that Google Maps says is 2 hours. It might take 6 if you hit traffic, road closures, or just get tempted by a scenic overlook.
Then your personal work rhythm.
Your home routines, best writing time, favorite chair, quiet corner. They just go up in smoke, as the writer put it. Their 8 to 4 schedule morphed into writing maybe 7 to 11 a.m. before campsite checkout, then maybe another block from 3 to 6 p.m. after getting settled in the new spot. Sundays often became work days to make up for time lost during the week to travel or sightseeing.
Wow, that's a big adjustment. How do you even focus with that kind of chopping and changing?
You learn to grab moments. They talked about flipping open the laptop and starting typing the minute the RV stopped. You really have to leverage that interstitial time waiting for something, short breaks. Work gets broken down into smaller chunks, maybe 15 minutes here, a few paragraphs there. It adds up.
So less about long, deep work sessions.
Often, yeah, though hopefully you get some of those too. They also mentioned that how you travel matters. Trying to work while your partner drives on a super winding road like Highway 1, forget it. But long, straight highways, or maybe even trains, much more conducive to getting work done while moving.
It sounds like the travel itself needs a rhythm, not just the work.
Totally. They learned that the hard way. Their initial plan was short drives, new place every night. But that meant every day was a travel day, leaving almost no time for focused work. Burnout City.
So what did they change?
They shifted to establishing a better travel rhythm, staying put for 2, 3, or even more days in one spot, then doing longer driving days when they did move. That allowed for actual full work days without the disruption of packing up and driving every single day. That was key for sustainability.
Makes sense. What about downtime? Like when clients are on holiday, Thanksgiving, Christmas, do you just stop working too?
Depends. You learn to leverage client breaks and new opportunities. Those holiday periods when clients naturally go quiet, they can be a godsend. You can use that time to catch up on your own projects without feeling pressured, or you can actually take time off yourself and go see the sights guilt-free.
Oh, using the natural lulls.
Exactly. And even while traveling, you got to keep your marketing going. Keep your website updated, your LinkedIn profile active. Leads can still come in. The writer actually got 4 inquiries for new ghostwriting gigs during their trip. Did the initial calls via Zoom from the RV? No problem.
Wow, so business development doesn't have to stop.
Not at all. And travel itself can spark new ideas for articles. Maybe you stumble on a local issue with national relevance, or you might even be able to schedule an in-person meeting with a potential client if your travels take you near them. It opens up different kinds of opportunities.
This sounds like it requires a lot of mental energy, especially if you're traveling with someone, sharing a small space, juggling work and non-work.
Oh yeah, absolutely. If you're with a partner, managing expectations is huge. You have to have honest talks before you leave about how much work time you'll need, what your schedule might look like, and what you can realistically contribute to the non-work stuff.
To avoid resentment building up.
Exactly. The goal is to enjoy life more.
Yeah.
Not end up bickering over who did the dishes or drove the last leg. The writer made a real point of pitching in with cooking, cleaning, driving, packing on their days off to show they were still fully present in the partnership, not just locked away working all the time.
And underneath it all, there must be some anxiety, right? The uncertainty, the fear of things going wrong, not making enough money.
That's incredibly real. The writer was very candid, admitting she was terrified initially, worried she wouldn't write, would lose clients, would go broke. It's a common fear.
So how do you deal with that?
You have to actively conquer that anxiety. Acknowledge the feelings, but manage them. Trust your skills. Trust your ability to adapt. Getting regular exercise helps massively with sleep and just general mental state. Journaling about why you're doing this, how the experiences are enriching you, maybe making you a better writer, that helps too. The good news is confidence tends to build as you go. You figure things out. It's a journey in more ways than one.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting for a lot of people, I think. The money. Many folks are drawn to this idea because they think, oh, I can live super cheap in Southeast Asia or Latin America. But is it actually cheaper than staying put? What are the real, maybe hidden costs?
Yeah, that's a huge part of the allure, but it often bumps up against reality. It really exposes the illusion of cheap travel.
Hmm.
While the potential for savings is there, our sources consistently show that costs can quietly pile up behind the Instagram filters and tropical workspaces.
Hmm.
Any savings in one area, like rent, can easily get eaten up elsewhere if you're not incredibly careful with your budget.
So that $500 a month apartment in Bali, maybe not the full story.
Often not. Let's look at housing costs. Nomads usually aren't signing year-long leases, right? They're doing shorter stints in Airbnbs, hostels, co-living spots. That flexibility costs money.
A short-term premium.
Exactly. Those short-term rentals in popular places like Lisbon, Medellin, Canggu, they're priced for tourists. You could easily pay double, say, $1,000 or more a month for a place a local gets for $500 on a long lease. Plus, you've got hidden fees, cleaning, service charges on platforms like Airbnb, maybe even paying extra for a reliable Wi-Fi or a proper desk setup. Compare that to the stable cost of rent or a mortgage back home. It's much less predictable on the road.
Okay, housing isn't automatically cheap. What about getting around? Budget flights seem cheap initially.
Keyword. Initially, transportation expenses are notorious for snowballing. That $50 flight. Add checked bag fees, maybe $30. Airport transfer at both ends, maybe another $40 total. Visa on arrival fee, perhaps $50. Suddenly your cheap flight isn't so cheap.
And local transport adds up too.
Constantly. Every time you move, you're figuring out a new bus system, paying for Ubers or local taxis, maybe renting a scooter. And because nomads are often booking flights or trains more last minute, they tend to pay higher fares. At home, you know the cheapest routes, maybe you have a monthly pass. On the road, it's a constant stream of small transportation costs that really add up.
And you mentioned popular spots getting more expensive.
Mm-hmm.
So the affordable destinations aren't always staying affordable.
That's a huge factor. Cost of living variability and inflation are very real. Places that were famously cheap, like Bali, Mexico City, Lisbon, prices have exploded in recent years, partly because they became so popular with nomads.
So demand drives up prices.
Yep, there's even a term for it, nomad inflation. When you get a high concentration of nomads, especially in certain neighborhoods, they can start to outnumber locals. Their willingness to pay higher prices pushes everything up, not just rent, but groceries, restaurant meals, gym memberships. That local $5 lunch special suddenly becomes a $15 nomad-friendly brunch bowl.
Wow. Okay, so even if you manage accommodation and transport, just working can cost money, right? Finding that reliable Wi-Fi.
Absolutely. Workspace costs are a real thing. Good internet isn't guaranteed, especially if you need it for video calls or uploading large files. Many nomads find they need a co-working membership, which can easily run $100 to $300 a month.
That's not insignificant.
Not at all. But it buys you reliable Wi-Fi, a proper desk and chair, power outlets, maybe some networking opportunities. Trying to rely just on cafes, you end up feeling obligated to buy multiple coffees or snacks just to justify taking up space for hours. And it's often noisy and distracting. Those free cafe workspaces aren't really free.
And then there's the official stuff, the bureaucracy, visas, insurance. That must add up too.
Definitely. Unlike a tourist on a 2-week holiday, nomads often need longer stays. Visa and travel insurance fees are part of the budget. Getting a long-stay visa, if one's even available, can involve hefty application fees, maybe needing proof of income, background checks, sometimes even legal help. Costs vary wildly.
And insurance is a must, I assume.
It's non-negotiable. Proper long-term, nomad-specific travel insurance is essential. It covers health emergencies in different countries, maybe trip cancellation, gear theft. That can easily be $50 to $200 a month, depending on your age, where you're going, what coverage you need. You just can't risk not having it.
I can see how this is starting to paint a very different financial picture. What about the less tangible costs, like maintaining relationships, just feeling connected?
That's where social and networking costs come in. Nomad life sounds freeing, but it can actually be quite isolating. Making new friends when you move every few months takes effort and often money.
How so?
Well, co-working spaces often host events, but they might cost extra. Meetups might have fees. Maybe you fly to a conference to network or see friends who are elsewhere. Even just going out for dinner or drinks with new people in a new city. It all adds up. Your social life back home might be built around free activities or potlucks. On the road, socializing often involves spending money.
And does all this, the moving, the cost management, the finding Wi-Fi, does it impact your ability to actually earn money? Because that's kind of the whole point.
It absolutely can. There's a real impact on work productivity and earnings. Constant movement is disruptive. Jet lag, adjusting to new time zones, just the mental energy spent finding a decent workspace or figuring out the local grocery store.
Yeah.
It all takes away from focused work time.
So less focus means potentially less income.
For freelancers and entrepreneurs, definitely. If your productivity dips, your income likely dips too. There's also a real risk of burnout if you're constantly juggling work deadlines with travel logistics and the stress of navigating new environments. Your earning potential might actually decrease, at least initially or during heavy travel periods.
So wrapping up the cost section, is the digital nomad life really cheaper? What's the final word?
The bottom line seems to be, it depends, but probably not as much as you think. It can be cheaper, yes, if you are incredibly organized, plan meticulously far in advance, choose genuinely low-cost locations, and live very frugally. But for many, maybe even most, the combination of short-term premiums, hidden fees, travel costs, and productivity dips means the hidden expenses often cancel out or even outweigh any savings compared to a stable life back home. It's rarely the massive cost savings some imagine.
That really flips the common narrative. Which brings us to another critical point. Beyond the individual's budget and experience, what about the wider impact? How does this influx of digital nomads affect the local communities where they choose to set up shop, even temporarily?
Yeah, this is a really important area and something researchers are digging into more now. We can look at Canggu, Bali, which is like ground zero for digital nomadism in many ways. The research there shows a pretty significant gap between what you might expect the positive impacts to be, money flowing in, infrastructure improving, and what's actually happening on the ground.
It's not always a win for the locals, then.
Yeah, it's much more complex. Socially, for instance, the research in Canggu noted a big shift. Locals have become more reliant on social media for communication, moving away from traditional face-to-face interactions. While that opens up digital opportunities, it also subtly changes lifestyle patterns. Maybe weakens that strong community cohesion they had before.
A shift in the social fabric.
Yeah. And there are concerns about friction conflicts between tourists, nomads, and locals, and gradual shifts in local values, religion, even language, as the area becomes more internationalized.
That's pretty profound. What about the economic side? Surely bringing in foreign currency helps.
It does, for some. There are clear benefits. Locals have shifted from farming to tourism jobs, renting out properties, using social media to market businesses. Some people's incomes have definitely increased. But it's also led to sharply rising property prices and a general increase in the cost of living for everyone. That nomad inflation we talked about.
So it makes it harder for locals to afford living in their own community.
Exactly. The research stressed that the economic benefits aren't spread evenly, and the rising costs can displace locals or make life much harder. The reality in Canggu didn't quite match the theory of universally positive impacts.
So what's the takeaway from the Canggu example? What needs to happen?
The researchers really emphasize needing a more balanced, holistic approach. Yes, improve digital infrastructure like internet, but also make efforts to maintain social interaction and community bonds. And critically, the government needs to play a role in ensuring the economic benefits are shared more equitably, and that infrastructure improvements serve both nomads and locals. It's about creating sustainable destinations, not just temporary hotspots.
That makes sense. It's clear there's a responsibility there beyond just the individual nomad's choices, which leads nicely into the ethical debate. Some nomads themselves seem to be really wrestling with this, right? We saw discussions on places like Reddit. What are their main concerns?
Yeah, it's powerful reading those firsthand accounts. Nomads grappling with the ethics of, say, spending their strong currency, like US dollars or euros, in places with much lower wages, they worry directly about causing gentrification, driving up prices that locals can no longer afford.
They see the connection.
They do. They also raise questions about whether local governments are prioritizing tourist or nomad needs over their own citizens, and concerns about foreign-owned businesses, maybe even run by other nomads, potentially squeezing out small, local family businesses, especially in poorer communities.
And that point about visa reciprocity comes up too. Is it fair that I can easily go there when someone from there would find it incredibly difficult to come here? It's a real ethical tangle.
Those are definitely tough questions, but I guess there are counter-arguments too. It can't be entirely negative, can it? No, it's definitely nuanced. Some argue gentrification is complex, often driven by local policy choices like zoning laws or lack of investment in affordable housing, not just by the presence of foreigners. Others point out that many local businesses and economies, especially after the pandemic hit tourism so hard, genuinely welcome the influx of foreign cash. They see it as vital income.
A lifeline almost.
For some, yes. There's also a perspective that feeling intense guilt for existing or having relative wealth is maybe a particularly Western preoccupation, and that focusing on being kind, respectful, and humble towards locals is more productive than being paralyzed by guilt.
What about the environmental side, the flying? That comes up a lot.
It does. It's a constant debate. Some nomads feel their individual carbon footprint is tiny compared to, say, industrial pollution, arguing the plane will fly with or without me. Others are very conscious of it. It's that tension between individual responsibility and systemic change. And just to clarify that point about currency, when nomads talk about spending US dollars, they usually mean leveraging the purchasing power of their higher salary earned elsewhere, not literally using dollars everywhere. It's about the economic imbalance.
Okay, so if a nomad wants to travel more ethically, more responsibly, what practical steps can they take? What solutions came up in those discussions?
There were some really concrete suggestions. Number one, make a conscious effort to support truly local, family-owned businesses. Avoid the international chains or the trendy cafes clearly aimed only at foreigners.
Put money directly into local hands.
Exactly. Second, consider donating to local nonprofits working on issues like affordable housing or education in the area you're staying. Third, maybe engage in local volunteer work, food bank, animal shelter, helping kids practice English. Actually integrate and contribute.
Getting involved beyond just being a consumer.
Right. Fourth, practice slow travel. Staying longer in one place reduces your carbon footprint from flying, lets you build realer connections, and allows for more meaningful spending in the community. Fifth, a specific point. Avoid Airbnbs in cities with known housing crises. Think places like Lisbon, parts of Canada, Australia. Opt for hotels or local guest houses instead, which don't take long-term housing off the market for residents.
That's a very specific, actionable tip.
It is. And finally, things like considering carbon offsets for flights and just generally maintaining that mindful awareness of privilege and impact without letting it become crippling guilt. It's about striving to be a good guest, basically.
This is all fascinating. It really shows how this lifestyle is pushing boundaries, personal, geographical, ethical. And that brings us to another huge area, work itself and taxes. How is digital nomadism challenging our traditional ideas about jobs, residency, and who pays what to whom?
Massively. We're seeing this huge trend towards the decentralization of jobs. The whole work from anywhere thing, turbocharged by tech like Zoom and reliable internet, has changed the game.
Companies are hiring globally now, not just locally.
Increasingly, yes. Job postings might say remote Europe or remote North America, lifting those old geographical ties. This leads to what some are calling virtual immigration. People working for a company in one country while living in another, without ever going through traditional immigration channels.
What's the upside for companies doing this? Wider talent pool.
That's a big part of it, accessing skills they might not find locally. But it can also be framed as a win-win-win. Employees get flexibility and maybe access to jobs they couldn't get otherwise. Employers retain talent and find specialists. And potentially, economies benefit by attracting high-value jobs without the strain on physical infrastructure that mass immigration causes. Some companies might even adjust salaries based on the employee's chosen location and cost of living.
Okay, but if work is global and people are mobile, taxes must become an absolute nightmare. How do governments even track this? Where do you owe?
Bingo! Welcome to the tax labyrinth for digital nomads. It's incredibly complex. The big risks are double taxation, paying tax in two different countries on the very same income, and simply failing to comply with the rules, which can lead to hefty penalties. Our sources were unanimous. This is not DIY territory. Tax systems rely on strict definitions of residency, rules about where income is sourced. Trying to figure it out from a hammock in Costa Rica is a recipe for disaster.
Okay, so let's try to untangle this. What are the traditional ways countries decide who pays tax?
Generally, there are three main principles, though they often overlap in conflict. First is source taxation. The idea here is that income should be taxed where the economic activity generating it happens. The country provides the infrastructure security market, so it gets to tax the income earned there.
Makes sense. Tax it where it's made.
Right. But for a nomad earning income from clients in multiple countries while sitting in a fourth country, defining the source gets tricky fast.
Okay, what's the second principle?
Residence taxation. This taxes people on their worldwide income based on where they are considered legally resident. The logic is you benefit from the social services, infrastructure, etc. of your home base, so you contribute to its public finances regardless of where you physically earn the money.
Ah, but I can see the problem. What if the source country and the residence country both want to tax the same income?
Exactly. That's where you get juridical double taxation. Two countries claiming the right to tax the exact same slice of income. It's like getting two speeding tickets for the same offense from two different police forces.
Got it. And the third way, I think the U.S. is unique here.
Yes. Citizenship taxation. The U.S. is one of very few countries, Eritrea is sometimes cited as another, that taxes its citizens on their worldwide income simply because they are citizens, no matter where they live or work. It dates back to the Civil War, basically. The justification often involves ideas like ability to pay or citizens benefiting from U.S. services like consular support abroad, but it's heavily criticized for burdening citizens living abroad who may not use many U.S. services, and again, for creating major double taxation headaches.
Okay, so we have these conflicting principles. How do countries try to sort this mess out, especially for people living and working across borders? Are there international agreements?
Yes, that's where tax treaties come in, primarily based on the OECD Model Tax Convention. It's a template that countries use to negotiate bilateral agreements aimed specifically at preventing double taxation for people who are residents of one or both treaty countries.
So it tries to create clear rules.
It tries. A key part is Article 4, which has tiebreaker rules to determine a single country of tax residence if someone might qualify as a resident in both countries under their domestic laws. The goal is, for treaty purposes, you can only be resident in one place.
How do they break the tie?
It's a hierarchy of tests. First, where do you have a permanent home available? If that's unclear, where is your center of vital interests, your closer personal and economic ties? If that's ambiguous, where is your habitual abode? Where do you spend more time? If still unclear, what's your nationality? And if all else fails, the tax authorities of the two countries have to sort it out by mutual agreement. It's about finding where your connection is strongest.
Okay, that sorts out residency. What about the income itself, especially employment income earned while working remotely?
That's mainly covered by Article 15. The basic rule, 15.1, is your salary is usually taxed only in your country of residence, unless you physically perform the work in another country, the work state. In that case, the work state might also get the right to tax the income earned there.
Ah, the source principle again. But
Well,
there's an exception, right? You mentioned something about 183 days.
yes, the crucial exception for nomads and remote workers is in Article 15.2, often called the 183-day rule. This is key. If you meet three conditions, you're present in the work state for less than 183 days in any 12-month period, and your employer is not resident in that work state, and your pay isn't borne by a permanent establishment like a branch office your employer has in that work state, then the exclusive right to tax your salary shifts back to your country of residence.
Okay, let me process that. So if I'm a U.S. resident working remotely for my U.S. company while sitting in Portugal for, say, 4 months, Portugal doesn't get to tax my salary for that time.
Generally, yes, under Article 15.2 of a typical U.S.-Portugal treaty. Because you're there less than 183 days, your employer isn't Portuguese, and assuming they don't have a Portuguese branch paying you, the U.S. retains the sole right to tax that income. This rule is fundamental for short-term remote work arrangements.
What about working from home across borders? Like, if I live in France but normally commuted to Switzerland for work, but now work from my French home.
That's where it gets interesting. Those home working days mean you're not physically present in the usual work state, Switzerland. So, under the treaty principles, the taxing rights for those days often shift back to your residence state, France. Countries often use a salary split, allocating income based on the proportion of days physically worked in each location.
It really highlights how much these rules hinge on physical presence, doesn't it? Which feels kind of outdated for remote work.
It absolutely is. That's the fundamental challenge. The entire international tax framework, built around the OECD model, is heavily based on where you physically are. For digital nomads constantly moving, or remote workers who never physically enter the country where their employer or clients are based, this creates huge legal uncertainty, compliance burdens, and that ever-present risk of double taxation. It just doesn't fit the modern reality.
So, if the current system is broken, or at least straining, what's the proposed fix? How should we be taxing digital nomads and remote work in the future?
The main argument emerging from the sources we looked at is a potential shift towards a source-based taxation system for individuals, especially for income derived from remote work or digital nomad activities.
So focusing more on where the value is created, not just where the person happens to be sitting.
Exactly. The justification is that it better aligns tax obligations with the jurisdiction that provides the economic environment, the infrastructure, the market, the legal system that enables the income to be generated in the first place. It's less about the worker's physical location and more about the economic source of the income.
That sounds a bit like those new ideas for taxing big digital companies, like taxing based on where their users or customers are.
Precisely. It connects conceptually to things like the significant economic presence idea from the OECD's Big BEPS project, specifically Pillar 1, which tries to make sure multinational companies pay tax where they have significant economic engagement, even without physical presence. Applying a similar logic to individuals would mean income is taxed based on where the economic contribution happens.
But that sounds like a massive change. It would require countries all over the world to agree on a completely new system, right?
No, it's huge. It's not a simple tweak.
Yeah.
It would require significant international reform, collaboration, and agreement on how to define and implement such a system fairly and consistently. It's complex, no doubt about it, but it's presented as a potential way forward, a system that might actually fit the reality of our increasingly digital and mobile global economy, moving beyond that outdated reliance on physical location. It's about designing tax rules for how work actually gets done now.
Wow, what a journey we've been on. From that glossy Instagram image of working on the beach.
Yeah, all the way through the messy reality of finding Wi-Fi in an RV, juggling budgets, thinking about ethical impacts.
And landing right in the incredibly complex world of international tax treaties. It really shows the many layers of the digital nomad life.
It really does. It's this fascinating mix of personal freedom and liberation, challenging old ways of working, but it also forces us to look hard at the impact on communities and how our global systems, like tax, are struggling to keep up. It's a lifestyle that's undeniably shaping things.
So for everyone listening, whether you're dreaming of becoming a nomad yourself, or maybe you manage remote teams, or you're just fascinated by how work is changing, what's the big takeaway here?
Well, here's something to really chew on. In a world that's clearly embracing remote work more and more, where digital nomads are blurring borders and blending work and life across continents, how do our societies need to adapt? How do we need to fundamentally rethink things like our social contracts? We've talked a lot about tax, but what about community support, healthcare access, infrastructure development? How do we build systems that truly serve this growing, transient global workforce and protect the local communities they move through?
And looking ahead, how will this evolution continue to shape what employees want, what employers offer, and how economies function? And maybe most importantly, what role do you, the listener, play in that ongoing transformation?